My dad drove truck 9. The girl said it to a man in a very good coat, at 20 to 9 at night, through the gap in a chain-link gate. She did not say it the way children usually say things to strangers. There was no wobble in it, and nothing hopeful. She said it the way a person reads out a number they have been holding in their head for a long time, before she stopped talking and waited, with her chin up, to see what he would do with it. Grayson Holt had been at the depot for 11 minutes. He had come because his largest client wanted to see the owner's face before he signed anything, and because his people had told him that showing up at night, in the rain, at a working yard, was the kind of thing that got a renewal over the line. So he had put on the coat, and he had come out to Kestrel Freight at 8:30 in the evening, and for 11 minutes he had been walked along a row of loading bays by a man who was very good at walking people along. Sodium light, wet tarmac with diesel rainbows on it. 6 trailers loaded and shut, nose out, waiting. The yard smelled of cold metal and hot engines, 2 smells that do not usually happen together, and Grayson had noticed that he liked it, and been embarrassed by liking it. Then, the girl. She was small. 9, he would have guessed, maybe 10. 2 thick plaits, done neatly and done recently. A school sweatshirt, 3 sizes too big for her, sleeves shoved up to the elbow. She had a folding chair set up just inside the gate and a book on it, and she was not sitting in the chair, and she was not reading the book. My dad drove truck 9, she said again because he had not answered the first time. Calder Renner's hand arrived on Grayson's elbow before the second sentence was finished. Nella, Renner said, warm as anything. It's freezing. Go and sit in the office. And to Grayson, at exactly the volume that a thing is said when it is meant to be overheard by nobody. Driver's kid. Sad story, that one. We look after the families. And the thing Grayson would think about later, at 2 in the morning, on a hill, was not the girl. It was that he had let himself be moved. He felt the pressure at his elbow, and he simply went the way you go when someone confident touches you, and he walked 11 more steps along the row of bays with his host talking pleasantly about turnaround times, and he did not look back. He had gotten very good at being moved. Somewhere in the last 4 years he had become a man who arrived, was walked, was shown, and left, while some other person decided what he saw. 19 months, Renner was saying. Not a single missed window on the Northern contract. 19 months. That's good? That's unheard of. Grayson stopped walking. He was not sure, afterwards, what did it. Children who want something from a rich man do not sound like that. They sound like they are performing because someone has told them to be sweet. This girl had not been sweet at all. She had told him a fact and waited. Or it might have been the tense. My dad drove truck 9, not drives. Which one is 9? Grayson said. There was a pause then. It was not a long pause. Anyone who was not listening for it would have walked straight through it and never known it was there. But Grayson had spent 20 years in rooms where the pause is the whole message, and he heard it land and lift again. 9's out tonight, Renner said. Middle of the convoy, rolls at 11. That's not what I asked. Renner laughed easily. 3rd bay along, the one with the cracked mirror housing. She's an old girl, but she's sound. We had her in the shop in the spring. He checked his watch, without appearing to check it. The client's man is here at 7. Shall we get you inside? I've had them put the heating on in the meeting room, which I promise you is the only warm room on this site. In a minute. Grayson turned around and looked back down the row of bays, past the fuel island, to the gate. The girl had not gone to the office. She was standing exactly where she had been standing, in the rain, with her chin up, watching him. And when she saw that he had turned around, she did not smile, and she did not wave. She just kept looking, the way somebody looks when they have said the only thing they have, and are waiting to find out whether it counted. Behind him, 60 feet away, 3rd bay along, a truck sat loaded and shut with its nose pointed at the gate, and in 2 hours and 18 minutes it was going to pull out onto the northern road with a driver in it. He thought about the coat. It was a very good coat, and he had put it on at 7 o'clock that evening specifically because somebody had said that a yard likes to see that the owner made an effort, and he had stood in front of a mirror in a warm house and made an effort. He was standing in it now, in the rain, 60 feet from a truck he had been walked away from twice, being looked at by a child who had not blinked once. There was a version of the next hour where he went inside and shook a man's hand at 7 in the morning and drove home. He knew exactly how that version went. He had lived most of the last 4 years inside it. Nella Rourke had been standing at that gate every shift her mother worked for 11 months, and in that time she had said one sentence to 3 different people, and none of them had asked her a second question. She had counted that, too. If this first minute got you, do me a kindness before you go any further. Hit like and share this with somebody who would want to hear it. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight, because I read them. And subscribe, so the next story finds you on its own. The night dispatch office at Kestrel Freight was a portable cabin with a heater that worked and a door that did not, and the man inside it had been running the gate for 31 years. His name was Ambrose Kell. He was 66. He had a whiteboard on the wall behind him with 6 columns on it and a magnetic marker in his hand, and when Grayson came up the metal steps and filled the doorway, Ambrose looked at him the way a man looks at weather. "Mr. Holt, you know who I am. I know everybody who comes through that gate. It's the job." Grayson looked at the board. 6 trucks, 6 drivers. Departure times, load, route, return. "Tell me about 9. Ambrose did not ask why. He did not say anything about the girl, and he did not glance toward the gate, and the not glancing was so deliberate that Grayson noticed it and filed it. "9's loaded," Ambrose said. "3rd bay. Rolls at 11, middle of the 6. Northern run, so that's up the motorway, off at the junction, and then it's the old road over Bevan Hill." He tapped the column with the end of the marker. "Comes down the hill about 2 in the morning, back here for 6 if the traffic's kind." "Who's driving?" "D. Rourke." Grayson waited. Ambrose put the marker down. "That's all I've got on the board, Mr. Holt," he said. "The board's got what the board's got." Which was, Grayson thought, one of the more careful sentences he had heard in a while. He found her at the fuel island. She was standing on the step of the cab with the nozzle in the tank, one hand on the mirror arm, and she was watching the numbers roll on the pump the way people watch something they have watched 10,000 times. Rain coming down at an angle, yard lights making everything orange and hard. "Mrs. Rourke." She looked down at him. She did not come down off the step. "I'm Grayson Holt." "I know. I own the group." "I know that too." She said it without any edge at all, which was somehow worse than an edge. She went back to watching the pump. He tried again. "Your daughter spoke to me at the gate." "She would. She told me her father drove this truck." The numbers rolled. Delia Rourke did not move her hand off the mirror arm and did not look at him. "He did," she said. "Mrs. Rourke, I'd like to ask you about the accident." She did look at him then, and Grayson understood that he had misread the whole thing. He had expected grief or anger or the tightness people get when a rich man says a careful word like accident. What he got was a woman assessing exactly how much of her night this was going to cost her. "No," she said. "I'm sorry?" "No," respectfully. She hung the nozzle up and clicked the cap on. "You're here for the renewal. Your client's man is here at 7. Whatever this is, it isn't going to be finished tonight, and I'm rolling in 90 minutes, and if I stand here talking to you, my checks don't get done, and then I'm the one out of hours." She stepped down onto the tarmac, and she was a full head shorter than him, and it made no difference at all. "So, no, thank you." She went round the front of the cab with a rag in her hand, and started on the lights. Grayson stood in the rain at the fuel island, and felt something he had not felt in a long time, which was dismissed. Not insulted. Dismissed, the way a competent person dismisses an interruption, and he found to his surprise that he respected it enormously. He walked round to the driver's side while she worked. The door was open. Inside, the cab was clean the way a workspace is clean, not the way a room is clean. A jacket on the back of the seat, a phone charger, and in the pocket of the door, wedged upright where a person's hand would fall on it without looking, a steel thermos with a dent in the lid and a crack running down one side of the body. It was not a nice thermos. It was not new. It had plainly not been used in a long time, and it had plainly not been moved either. "Mrs. Rourke, I've got 60 minutes of checks and 50 minutes to do them in," she said from the front of the truck, not unkindly. "You can talk to me at 6 in the morning." Renner was there before he could answer, with a cup of coffee in each hand and his coat collar up, saying something friendly about the rain, and a hand had arrived at Grayson's elbow for the second time that evening, and Grayson found himself moving away from the third bay again. He let himself be walked about 20 feet. Then he stopped and looked back at the truck and thought a thing he would not have been able to say out loud yet. That was twice. Twice in 20 minutes he had been standing next to that particular vehicle, and twice a warm hand had arrived on his arm and taken him somewhere else. She was waiting for him by the tire rack, not at the gate anymore. She had moved, which meant she had been tracking him across the yard, which meant she had decided something. "You asked which one was 9, Nella Rourke said. "I did. So, you were listening?" "I was." She thought about that. Rain on her sweatshirt shoulders, hood down, plaits going frizzy at the ends. Grayson had the sense of being examined by someone with a checklist. "Are you allowed to stop a truck going out?" She said. "Why would I want to do that?" "That's not what I asked," which was, word for word, what he had said to Renner 40 minutes earlier, and Grayson laughed once before he could stop himself. She did not laugh back. She was not being funny. "Yes," he said. "I'm allowed." Nella nodded, as though a box had been ticked. Then she told him, "The trucks come back wrong after the hill." He waited. "Not all of them," she said. 4. 12 came back wrong in November before, then 5 in the spring, and the man had to have his hands looked at because they went numb from holding it, then 9 again in September, but that was a different driver and he only did 3 weeks and left. She had gone very slightly faster, the way people do when they have said something in their head many times and are finally saying it out loud. "That's 4 trucks, 9's 2 of them." "How do you know that?" "I was in them." Grayson said nothing. "Not 12, she said, correcting herself, because she was the sort of child who corrected herself. "I heard about 12, but I was in the others. I used to go on the run with my dad, from when I was 5. I sleep in the back. There's a bunk. It's got a curtain." She shrugged, and the shrug was the first childish thing she had done. "You're not really supposed to. Everyone did it." "And what does come back wrong mean?" "It means the brakes get hot on the hill, and then they don't work properly at the bottom and the driver has to do something about it," she said. "After that, the truck comes back, and they say the driver did it wrong." The rain came down. 60 feet away, a fitter was walking the length of a trailer with a torch, checking lights, and the beam swung and steadied and swung. "Nella," Grayson said, "who have you told?" "I told Mum." "And?" For the first time, something moved in her face. "She said not to say it to anyone at the yard," Nella said. "She said it in a way where you know it's important, so I didn't." Her chin came up again. "But she's driving 9 tonight, so." He found Renner in the meeting room with the heating on and a laptop open, and he asked about the hill. And this, Grayson would think later, was the moment. Not the gate, not the fuel island. This, because Renner was magnificent. He did not get defensive. He did not ask who had been talking. He turned in his chair and gave Grayson his whole attention, and said that descent grades were the single hardest thing in the business, and that a long hill punishes a tired driver more than anything else on the road, and that the company ran refresher training twice a year specifically because of it, at real cost, which Grayson was welcome to see on the training spend. He said that 4 incidents in 2 years across a fleet that size was not a pattern, it was a Tuesday, and that if Grayson wanted, he would happily have the whole route reviewed after the renewal was in, when there was time to do it properly. It was a good answer. It was better than good. Grayson had been given 1,000 answers in his life, and this one was in the top 10. Renner did one more thing. "Look," he said gently, "I know where this has come from, and I want to be careful how I say it, because there's a child involved." He took his glasses off. The driver on 9 last November was Theo Rourke. It was a bad night, and it was a bad outcome, and there's a finding against his name. Driver error. It was investigated properly and that's what it found. His widow drives for us now because we kept her on, and we kept her on because her husband made a mistake, and we don't think a family should pay twice for that. He put the glasses back on. That little girl has to live with a version of it that lets her sleep. I'd never take that off her. But you asked me a straight question, so... The heater ticked. Grayson looked at him and understood two things at once. The first was that nobody had asked him about Theo Rourke. Renner had raised the name and the finding, and the widow entirely on his own, in a conversation about brake temperatures. The second was that if he said one word about any of it now, the rest of the night would be managed. That's helpful, Grayson said. Thank you. Not at all. I'll get out of your way. At 10:52, with the yard lights on and the rain easing and the 6 trucks lined up nose out, Grayson Holt walked down the row to the third bay, opened the passenger door of truck 9, and climbed in. Delia Rourke stared at him. Get out! No, he said. They argued about it for 4 minutes and she lost, and both of them knew she was always going to lose, and that was the worst part of it. This is my cab, she said. It's your cab. You can't be in it. I can, actually. That's the whole problem with me being here. He said it flatly, without enjoying it. Mrs. Rourke, I'm not going to sit in your seat and I'm not going to talk to you while you're working and I'm not going to write anything down. I'm going to ride the run. That's all. Why? Because I've owned this company for 4 years and I've never done it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached past him, pulled the passenger door shut and said, Belt. At 11:03, the convoy pulled out of the gate in a line, 6 sets of tail lights swinging north, and Grayson Holt watched Kestrel Freight slide backwards in the mirror with a man standing in the middle of the yard watching them go. The first hour, she did not say one word to him. He had expected that to be uncomfortable. It was not. What made it interesting was that he could not follow what she was doing. Her hands kept moving. That was the thing. There was never a moment when she was simply sitting there. She was reading the mirrors on a loop he could not predict, touching the wheel and letting it run, dropping a gear before a rise he had not seen coming, easing off 2 seconds before the lorry ahead of them touched its brakes. She never once looked hurried, and she never once looked relaxed. Grayson had read, he supposed, 100 operational reports about this business. Utilization, fuel burn, incidents per million miles. He had sat in rooms where people summarized the work of 2,000 drivers in a slide with 4 numbers on it, and he had nodded and asked good questions and never in his life understood what the job actually was. It was this. It was a woman making 400 small decisions an hour in the dark and being judged entirely on the ones that went wrong. At 10 past midnight, the radio crackled. 9. This is base. Delia keyed it. 9. Just checking in. Renner. Warm, unhurried, entirely pleasant. How's the ride, Mr. Holt? Is she looking after you? Grayson looked at the handset for a second. Very well, thank you, he said. Good, good. Cab heater, on that one's temperamental. I should have warned you. Any trouble at all, you call me directly. I will. Any hour. Thank you, Calder. The radio clicked off. Delia Rourke did not look away from the road, but something in her jaw changed, and Grayson understood that she had heard exactly what he had heard, which was a man checking that a package was still where he had left it. At 20-1, 90 miles from the yard, there was a sound behind the seats. It was not a large sound. It was the sound of a person turning over. Delia's eyes went to the mirror above the windscreen and closed once for slightly too long. Nella, she said. The curtain moved. A face appeared in the gap, creased on one side from the pillow, plaits flattened. I'm awake, Nella said, which was not an answer to anything. How long have you been in there? Since the yard. Since the yard? You said stay where I can see you, Nella said, and I could see you the whole time. Grayson had watched a number of people receive very bad news. Never like this. Silently, both hands still on the wheel, the truck still doing 56 miles an hour on a wet motorway in the dark. Turnarounds at Larch Cross, she said at last. 90 minutes. I'll call your gran from there. Okay. Get back in the bunk. Okay. The curtain closed, and Grayson Holt sat in the second seat of truck 9 with the heater ticking and the wipers going, and did the arithmetic that he would still be doing at 4 in the morning and at 40 at night for a long time afterwards. He had put himself in this cab because he wanted to see something with his own eyes. That was the noble version, and it was even true. But he had not stopped the convoy. He could have. He had been asked, more or less directly, by a 9-year-old at a chain-link gate, and instead he had got in and made himself a passenger, because being a passenger felt like doing something while committing to nothing. And now there was a child in the bunk behind him. Ahead, past the wipers, the tail lights of 5 trucks strung out in a line, and somewhere past those, an hour on, the junction that came off the motorway and onto the old road. "Mrs. Rourke," he said, "how long until the hill?" She did not ask which hill. "Hour and 40, she said. She started talking somewhere after the second services, and it took him a while to work out why. Not because she had warmed to him. Because it was 1 in the morning, there were 4 hours of road left, she had a child in the bunk, and talking is one of the things you do to stay sharp. She redoes her own plats, Delia said, out of nothing. Since she was 6. I do them, she takes them out, does them again. Not better, just hers." Grayson said nothing, which he was learning was the correct move. "She counts things," she said. "Always has. Steps to the postbox. How many times the fridge clicks. It's not a worry thing. It's just how her head sits." She counted the trucks. She counted the trucks. The wipers went. A sign came up green and gone. "We're in a flat above a laundrette," Delia said. "It's fine. It's warm, which the last one wasn't. School's a 20-minute walk, and I do the run in the morning after I get in, and then I sleep from 10 to 3. She changed gear without any apparent thought. "That's what nights are for. Nights pay £11 an hour more than days. There is no version of this where I do days. You could ask for a review of the rate." She laughed. It was the first sound of its kind she had made. "Mr. Holt," she said, "I want you to hear how that sounded." He sat with that for 1.5 miles. "Yes," he said. "All right." At 1:30 she told him about Theo, and she did it the way she did everything, which was once, properly, without decoration. "He was careful," she said. "That's the bit nobody will have told you. He was the one who wouldn't take a load if the straps were wrong. He was unpopular for it." She checked the near side mirror. "He came down that hill 400 times, and on the 5th of November he came down it once, and they wrote a sentence about him, and now that sentence is what he is." "What was the sentence?" "Driver error. 2 words. She said them the way you would set something heavy down on a table. They were kind about it," she said. "That's the thing people don't understand. Nobody was cruel to me, not once. They were extremely kind. They gave me his job." The road came at them. "And every so often," Delia said, "somebody puts a hand on my arm and tells me that it could happen to anyone and that I mustn't blame him, and I say thank you." She did not say anything else about it, then or later. She checked her mirrors and drove, and Grayson understood that the door had been opened exactly as wide as she intended and was now shut. At Larch Cross she took 20 minutes, made a phone call to her mother that Grayson could not hear and did not try to, and came back with 2 teas and gave him one without comment, which he understood to be a significant event. He walked to the end of the parking area with his phone. The client's man would not be awake. Grayson called him anyway, and he answered on the 4th ring, sounding like a person who had been asleep and was pretending briskly not to have been. "Grayson, everything all right? One question. It's about the penalty clause. At 2 in the morning? What does an hour late actually cost us, on the northern schedule, per hour?" There was a pause, then some movement, and the sound of a man who keeps his laptop by the bed. He read the number out. Grayson stood in a lorry park in the middle of the night and looked at the 6 trailers lined up under the lights and did a piece of arithmetic that took about 4 seconds and that he would have preferred to take longer. The penalty for being 1 hour late, on that schedule, was more than the cost of a rebuilt cab. Not close to it. More than it. "Grayson?" Sorry. Yes, that's what I needed. Is there a problem with tomorrow? No, Grayson said. Be there at 7. He walked back across the tarmac to truck 9 with the tea going cold in his hand, and every single thing Calder Renner had said to him that evening rearranging itself quietly into a different order. It had never been carelessness. It had never been tired drivers or bad hills or a Tuesday. It was a sum. Somebody had sat down with 2 numbers, the cost of a truck out of service and the cost of an hour late, and had put them next to each other and had done what the numbers said. And when a truck came back wrong, the cheapest possible explanation, the one that cost the company nothing at all, was that the driver had made a mistake. 3 drivers. 3 sentences written about 3 people who could not argue. He climbed up into the cab. Nella had the curtain open and was sitting up with a blanket round her shoulders, entirely awake. We're near the junction, she said. Are we? After the junction, it's the old road, and then it's the hill. She said it without any drama at all. It's about 40 minutes. Delia pulled her belt across. Get in the bunk properly, she said, and put the strap on. She started getting ready for it 4 miles out, and she did everything right, and Grayson knew she was doing everything right, because she told him what she was doing while she did it. I'm going down 2 gears now, Delia said. Not at the top. Now. You want to be in the gear before you need it. The engine note dropped and settled. Engine brakes on. That's this. She touched a stalk. That does the slowing. Not the pedal. If you're using the pedal on a hill like this, you've already made a mistake 4 minutes ago. Understood. I'm telling you because you asked to see it. The road tipped. It was not dramatic. That surprised him. He had expected something like a cliff, and what he got was a long grey slope in the headlights curving away to the left with a white line down the middle of it and trees on both sides going down and not stopping. 4 miles. 2 in the morning. Wet. Marker, Nella said from the bunk. I've got it. That's the first one. Grayson looked over his shoulder. She had the curtain hooked back and the strap across her, and she was sitting up watching the road over her mother's shoulder. And she was not frightened. That was the thing he could not get past afterwards. She was doing a job. There's 3 arrestor beds, Nella said to him. 1 at the first bend, 1 at the second bend, and 1 right at the bottom before the roundabout. The one at the second bend is the good one because it's longer. Nella, Delia said. He should know where they are. He should, Delia agreed. And now he does. Sit back. For 1.5 miles it was fine. The engine held it. The needle sat. Delia's hands were loose on the wheel, and the truck came down the grade at a steady 31 miles an hour, and Grayson felt his shoulders come down off. His ears and thought, with something close to embarrassment, that a 9-year-old had counted 4 coincidences and he had built a whole night out of it. Then the note changed. It was small. The engine brake sound thinned out, the way a fan does when you cut its power, and the truck went very slightly quiet, and began, immediately, and without any drama at all, to go faster. Right, Delia said. That was all. 1 word. She went for the gear, and it would not have it. She went for it again, lower, and got it, and the engine screamed and grabbed, and the truck slowed, and kept going. Retarder's gone, she said. Nella, strap. It's on. Mr. Holt, both hands on the rail above the door and put your feet flat. Grayson put both hands on the rail above the door and put his feet flat. She touched the brakes. He felt it, in the pedal and in the floor and up through the seat, and he did not have to be told what it was. There was pressure at the top and nothing under it, like standing on a stair that is not there. Long, Delia said to nobody. Okay. 33 miles an hour. 36. Second bend, Nella said. 900 meters. Then the bed's on the left, straight after. That's the long one? That's the long one. Good girl. The next 11 minutes of Grayson Holt's life were the quietest 11 minutes he had ever spent. Nobody screamed. Nobody prayed. A woman worked. She talked the whole way down in short, flat sentences, half of them to the truck. She used the gears and the terrain, She used a rising bit of camber on the second bend that Grayson would not have known was there. She stayed off the pedal. Because the pedal was gone, she kept the thing straight, and she bled it off a mile an hour at a time, and behind her, a child called the distances out loud. 400. Got it. 200. It's after the reflectors. I see them. Mum, it's the one that goes up. I know, baby. Hold on. And Delia Rourke put a 15-ton truck into an arrestor bed at 19 miles an hour, straight, and the gravel came up over the wheels and took hold of them, and the world went from noise to a long dragging hiss to nothing at all. The cab rocked once and stopped. The wipers kept going. For about 4 seconds, nobody moved. Grayson could hear the engine idling and the rain and his own pulse in his ears, and he was aware distantly that his hands had gone white on the rail above the door. Something rolled and knocked against his foot. He looked down. The thermos had come out of the door pocket and was lying on the floor of the cab between his shoes, dented lid, cracked down the side. Then Delia Rourke, who had not yet taken a full breath, reached past him and picked up the radio handset. All units, this is 9. I'm in the bed at Bevin, second bend, I'm off the road, and we're all right. Her voice did not shake, and it did not hurry. Do not come down on the engine brake. Say again, do not trust the retarder. Get your speed off at the top and use the first bed if you're not happy. Confirm. The radio came back, one after another, 5 voices in the dark. She hung the handset up. Then she put both hands over her face for about 3 seconds and took them away again and turned round in her seat. Nella, she said, come here. They came back into the yard at 6:10 on the back of a recovery unit, and the whole night crew was out. Nobody had told them to be. Word moves through a depot faster than it moves through a company, and by the time truck 9 came through the gate on the low loader, there were 30. Odd people standing about in the grey light with tea going cold in their hands, fitters and drivers and the 2 women from the transport office, watching. The client's man was there too, early, in a car with the engine running. And Calder Renner was standing in the middle of the yard in a clean coat, and when he saw Grayson Holt climb down off the recovery unit, his face did something complicated and settled into concern. Grayson, my God, are you all right? I'm fine. I've been on the phone since 4. I've got the vehicle examiner coming out. I've got a hire cab on the way, and I want you to know that I am taking this extremely seriously. He put a hand out toward Grayson's arm. Grayson stepped past it. He walked out into the middle of the yard where everyone could see him, and he turned round. Calder, he said, I'd like to ask you some questions here, if that's all right. Out here. Renner smiled. Of course. Although I'd suggest the office might be more. Here's fine. The yard went quiet in the way a place goes quiet when 30 people stop pretending to do something. When was truck 9 last in for brake service? March, Renner said, without hesitation. I can get you the exact date. And what's the interval meant to be? There's a manufacturer figure and there's an operational figure. The operational figure takes account of load profile and route. We run to the operational figure. That's standard across the industry, Grayson. It isn't Kestrel being clever. Who set the operational figure on this fleet? I did. On advice. Whose advice? Our safety consultant. Who pays the safety consultant? There was a small pause. Not a long one. A yard full of drivers heard it. We do, Renner said. As you'd expect. Grayson nodded slowly, as if that settled something, and asked the third question. What's the late penalty on the Northern contract, per hour? Renner's mouth opened and stopped, and every single person in that yard did the sum. Grayson watched it happen. He watched it go round the crescent of faces like a light coming on down a street, because these were people who moved freight for a living and knew exactly what a rebuilt cab costs and had just been told in public what an hour was worth. Somebody near the fitter's bay said something very short, and somebody else told them to shut up. Mr. Kell, Grayson said. Ambrose Kell was standing on the metal steps of the dispatch cabin with a mug in his hand. Sir, would you come down here, please? He came down, 66 years old, 31 of them on that gate, and he stood in the middle of a yard he had never once stood in the middle of. In the last 2 years, Grayson said, how many trucks have come back off Bevan Hill with brake trouble? Ambrose looked at Renner. Then he looked at the drivers. Then he looked at nothing at all, and his mouth moved once before anything came out of it. 4, he said. Which ones? 12, in the November before last. 5, in the spring. 9, last November. He swallowed. And 9 again in September. And what happened to the drivers? 12 was Haldon Row. Finding against him, driver error. He went to a firm in Dunbridge, and after that he stopped driving. Ambrose's voice was going, and he kept talking anyway. 5 was Marion Ashby. Finding against her. She's on supermarket deliveries now, days, half the money. September was a young lad on a 3-week trial. They didn't even do a finding. They just didn't renew him. He stopped. And last November, Grayson said. Last November was Theo Rourke, Ambrose said, and Theo Rourke didn't get out of the cab. Nobody moved. Why didn't you say anything? Grayson asked, not unkindly. Because I've got 11 months to my pension, Ambrose said, and a dispatcher who argues is a dispatcher who gets replaced. And I have thought about that every single night for 2 years, and there isn't a version where I come out of it well. So I'm not going to stand here and pretend there is. Grayson let that sit. Then he said, there's one more person. Nella Rourke was standing by the recovery unit with a blanket round her that somebody had produced from somewhere, holding her mother's hand. Nella, Grayson said, would you tell them what you told me at the gate? She looked up at her mother. Delia looked back down at her and did not tell her what to do. Nella let go of her hand and walked out a few steps so that people could hear. My dad drove truck 9, she said. Because she was the sort of child who was accurate, she added the rest of it. 12 came back wrong in November before, then 5 in the spring, then 9, that was my dad, then 9 again in September. She looked around at the drivers. That's 4 trucks, 9's 2 of them. A 9-year-old counting out loud in a truck yard at 6 in the morning. Grayson turned to Renner. Would you like to respond to that? Calder Renner did not shout, and he did not deny it, and that was what finished him. He looked round the yard at the drivers, at the 2 women from the transport office, at the client's man standing by his car with the door open, and Grayson watched him come to a decision. He decided to explain. Right, he said. Yes, all right. He put his hands in his coat pockets. I extended the intervals. Across the fleet, 18 months ago, on this route in particular. Nobody made me do it, and nobody told me to hide it. Somebody near the fitters made a low sound, and I'd like you all to understand why. Renner's voice was completely steady, the voice of a man who had rehearsed this to himself in the car many times and had always come out of it well. A truck in the workshop is a truck not earning. On the northern schedule, an hour late costs this company more than most of you make in a year. That is not my rule. That is the contract. That contract is the reason 240 people here have a job. Calder, Grayson said. No, you asked me out here in front of everybody, so let me finish it in front of everybody. He was not angry. He was reasonable, and it was awful. Every operator in this country runs to an operational figure. Every single one. I made a judgment about an acceptable level of risk on behalf of a business that would rather not know that judgments like that get made. And it held for 18 months, and the record was the best in the region. 4 trucks came back wrong. 4 out of 9,000 runs. One of them had a man in it. And Renner said, I know that. And for one moment, something moved across his face that might have been real. Then he said the sentence, but if I'd sent every truck in on the manufacturer figure, we'd have lost the contract, and I would be standing in this yard telling 240 people they were finished. Somebody has to do the arithmetic. I'm not ashamed of doing the arithmetic. I'm sorry about the outcome. The yard was absolutely silent, and Grayson understood, watching 30 faces, that Renner had just done more damage to himself in 90 seconds than any accusation could have done, because every person standing on that tarmac had just heard, in plain language, what number they had been on. Mr. Renner? It was Delia. She had come out from beside the recovery unit, and she was standing about 12 feet from him with her hands at her sides. Mrs. Rourke, I don't think this is... You came to my flat, Delia said. Rena stopped. You came to my flat on the 9th of November, and you sat on my settee, and you told me that Theo was the best driver you had, and that these things happen to good drivers. Her voice did not rise. It did not shake. It was the same voice she had used on the radio coming down the hill. And you told me not to blame him. You said that twice. You said, don't let anybody tell you he was careless, and don't you go carrying that. Nobody moved. And I have carried it for 11 months anyway, she said, because there is a piece of paper with his name on it that says driver error, and every yard in this county has seen it. My daughter has. Carried it. She stopped telling people things. She was 5 years old riding in that bunk, and she counted 4 trucks, and she told me, and I told her not to say it at the yard, because I needed the job. She stopped for a second. Only a second. I did that, Delia said. You made it so that was the sensible thing for me to do. That's what you did to us, not the brakes, that. Rena said, Delia, Mrs. Rourke, she said. Grayson stepped forward. The finding against Theo Rourke's name is withdrawn, he said. He said it loudly, and he turned as he said it, so that it went round the whole yard. As of now, in front of all of you. I'll do it in writing this morning, and I'll telephone every operator that was ever sent it, myself, and tell them what I'm telling you. He did not make a mistake. The truck was sent out to him wrong. He looked at Ambrose. The same goes for Halden Rowe and Marion Ashby. Find them. Today. Yes, sir. Rena waited, Grayson thought, for somebody to argue with him. Being argued with would have been survivable. Nobody did. The fitters went back to the bay. The 2 women went inside. A driver walked past him to check a strap and did not look up. And that was how Calder Rena left Kestrel Freight in a clean coat at 6:20 in the morning, with everybody going back to work around him. The client's man was still standing by his car with the door open and the engine running, and on the bonnet, in a plastic wallet, was the contract that had not been signed. The client's man was called Ivor Brandt, and he had been standing in a truck yard since 5:30 in the morning, and he had heard all of it. Grayson, I'll come back another day. No, now. Grayson took the plastic wallet off the bonnet and found the page he wanted, which took a while because he had never once read this contract properly. The late delivery clause. Per hour. I'm taking it out. Brandt looked at him. Not reducing it, Grayson said. Taking it out. Because what that clause does, Ivor, is it makes an hour more expensive than a truck. And once that's true, somebody in my company will always find the same answer. And it won't be a villain who does it. It'll be a competent man with a spreadsheet who thinks he's protecting jobs. Our board will have something to say about that. Probably. You understand I can walk. You can walk, Grayson said. You've been standing in this yard for an hour. You've heard what the clause bought you. Ivor Brandt looked at the recovery unit with truck 9 on the back of it, and at the 30-odd people finding reasons to be within earshot, and at the girl in the 2 big sweatshirts sitting on the step of the dispatch cabin with a blanket round her. Take it out, he said. I'll manage my board. The rest of it took a month, and most of it was ordinary, which is how these things actually end. Halden Rowe was found in Dunbridge, working nights in a warehouse, and had his finding lifted, and cried on the telephone, and was embarrassed about it. Marion Ashby was found on supermarket deliveries, had hers lifted, did not cry, and asked quite reasonably about 11 months of lost earnings. She got them. The maintenance budget stopped being a line any one director could move. The manufacturer's figure went back on every vehicle, and the Northern schedule got 20 minutes of slack built into it, which cost a great deal less than anybody had ever pretended. And the fund that paid the 3 families was put in a name because Grayson insisted on it, and the name was Theo Rourke. Delia was offered the fleet safety role in the 2nd week. She took 3 days over it. It isn't the money, she said when she came back with her answer. You can keep that. It isn't the apology either. I know. It's the hours. She said it flatly, the way her daughter said things. She sleeps at home. She does her homework at a table that isn't a workplace. I do the school run and I'm there at 3:30. If this job means somebody else does that, then somebody else can have the job. The hours don't change. Grayson said. Say it properly. The hours don't change. You'll write the shift pattern. If anybody moves it, you come to me, and I'll move them. She thought about that for a while. All right, she said. On a Tuesday in the spring, at about 5 in the afternoon, a man who owned a company that moved 40,000 tons a week sat at a small kitchen table above a laundrette and let a 9-year-old explain to him, with a diagram, why plats done by somebody else are never right. Truck 9 had been 6 weeks in the workshop and had come out with everything replaced that could be replaced. Nobody had wanted to drive it. Delia took it out herself the first week back, in daylight, empty, over Bevan Hill and down the other side, because somebody had to, and it might as well be her. The thermos was washed now. It was back in the door pocket on the driver's side, wedged upright where a person's hand falls on it without looking. It was not going anywhere tonight. Neither was the truck. Here is what this story leaves behind. When something goes wrong, there is always a cheapest explanation, and it is almost always the person with the least power to argue. It costs nothing to write down. It closes the file. And it is almost never the true one. Somebody was tired, somebody was careless, somebody made a mistake. Those sentences get written about people who cannot answer back, by people who are never asked to prove it. A child counted 4 trucks. That was all she had. No paperwork, no evidence, nothing but a number she had been carrying since she was 5 years old and a sentence she had rehearsed for 11 months at a chain-link gate. She was right, and she was right the whole time, and the only thing that ever stood between her and being believed was whether one adult decided to stop walking. So when somebody small tells you something, and it is inconvenient, and everybody around you has a good reason why it cannot be true, stop walking. Ask which one is 9. If this story moved you, do me a kindness. Like it, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it tonight. Tell me in the comments what you would have done at that gate, because I read every one of them. And subscribe, because there is another story coming next week, and I would like you to be here for it. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.